So
Right.
most encounters are benign and loving, and I think if you were to ask me what is the commonality, in other words, why are these people, specific people, being taken, and they're diverse, any this experience knows no ethnicity, no religion, no social status, uh, nothing of that kind seems to be in the picture, and sometimes not even education, which might be surprising. But I tell
Right.
you what all these individuals seem to have is very high PSI ability. They have psychic abilities, and generally the experiencers that I work with have also had other types of paranormal experiences, perhaps with discarnate spirits or ghosts, if you will, or so, telekinesis or some other kind of thing. So these are
Right.
people who were born with a skill, and I just think really maybe it's a question, since many advanced races are telepathic.
Generation X Paranormal. Well, hey everybody, welcome back.
Hey everyone.
We're Generation X Paranormal. I'm Logan.
And I'm Nicole.
So we've got an amazing episode, as I always say. Yeah, I'm excited about it. We we typically have regression therapists, hypnotherapists, and things like that for like past life. And we've done that a couple of times, but all of them have been fabulous. But we haven't really talked to anyone just yet about UFO or
Experience.
yeah, experiencers, UFO alien experiencers. So that's who we have today. We have Lesley Mitchell-Clarke. And can you tell us a little bit about Lesley?
Sure. Lesley Mitchell-Clarke is a Toronto-based certified clinical hypnotherapist who specializes in a number of modalities, including working with individuals who feel that they have had experiences with extraterrestrial beings. Most of this fascinating work, as well as metaphysical therapies such as past life and inner life regression, takes place at Lesley's Toronto Hypnosis Clinic, Lightwork Hypnosis.
Wow.
And she also has a book
Okay.
called Intersection, A True Story of Extraterrestrial Contact.
Awesome. That'd be great to talk to her about. Let's talk to Lesley.
Yeah, let's talk to her.
Well, hey Lesley, how you doing?
I am just doing great, guys, and I just want to thank you for asking me to fall by through the ethers today, and
Yeah, no
really
problem at
looking
all.
forward to chatting with you, and jumping down the old rabbit hole as much as possible.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's what we love to do.
Yeah, we are too.
And welcome to Generation X Paranormal. We've been, we always typically look at the guests that we're going to have and go, we're very excited to talk because we really are. We talk to everybody,
Hmm.
but um, the last few, I should say, maybe the only, and we'll get into more of the logistics and everything that you do, but hypnotherapy that the folks we've spoken to mainly focus on like past life regression
Hmm.
and things like that. And
Hmm.
I've kind of been really itching to talk to somebody that kind of
Mm.
focuses on kind of a passion of mine. So,
Yeah.
Ah,
but but
wonderful.
yeah,
Well, I've got to tell you that it wasn't an instantaneous thing that I did from the very beginning. I've been a hypnotherapist for around 20 years now or so. And I had to get certain certifications, particularly the ones that helped me develop my protocols were the certifications in both past life and interlife regression. So I do that. I did a lot of it. I still do it. But I guess in differentiating my work with experiencers, I didn't reinvent the wheel, but what I did do is I adapted tried and true regression techniques from particularly past life regression, because we are going into a kind of a a spiritual realm, and sometimes we are, working to dissolve any kind of memory blocks, whether they're self-imposed or not. And
Hmm.
so I just adapted the Newtonian. Michael Newton is really the contemporary founder of the way we do regression processes, and particularly metaphysical regression. So it's all based on stuff that I know works. So
Sure.
Right. Yeah.
um,
Yeah, that's
I
perfect.
I think that, like past life regression, it's always desirable if we can get the individual into a very, deep, relaxing space. It's not always necessary, but I think it provides a better experience for the client. And after all, at the bottom of everything, I consider myself a healer, and I'm
Hmm.
here really to help these dear people integrate their incidents of high strangeness into their current, third density lifetimes. That's really the
Right.
trick of it. It's not that the things happened. It's how do you accept them and how do you integrate them, because I've got to tell you, they generally do not stop. And most
Mm.
people that are experiencers are lifelong experiencers.
Yep,
So,
absolutely
the
correct.
individual has to find a way to move ahead in their uniqueness, I should say.
Right.
Sure.
These are special people, who are privileged to have these relationships, and they do, generally speaking, tend to be uh, deep relationships with
Hmm.
individuals who are they could some of them, I believe, are interdimensional. Some of them, I think, are even superdimensional. So it's
Right.
there's a wide the universe is filled with life. And it's almost amusing that so many people on this planet are it's like they're looking through a toilet
Hmm.
paper tube. The
Yeah.
blinders are on, but
Yeah.
I'm telling you, the abduction phenomena. I don't often use the word abduction because that does imply, a certain amount of negativity. And I can
Mm.
tell you that most experiences that people have, I mean, upwards of 75, 80% are benign or wonderful. It's
Right.
only a very small percentage, maybe 30%, that can have negative connotations. And most of those types of experiences have occurred in some of the more disreputable programs perpetuated by the United States and the Black Ops programs. And there are certain
Hmm.
programs that are quite toxic. And the worst things I've ever heard have been from situations like that.
Right.
So most
Mhm.
encounters are benign and loving. And I think if you were to ask me what is the commonality, in other words, why are these people, specific people, being taken, and they're diverse. Any This experience knows no ethnicity, no religion,
Hmm.
no social status. uh, Nothing of that kind seems to be in the picture, and sometimes not even education, which might be surprising. But I tell
Right.
you, what all these individuals seem to have is very high PSI ability. They have psychic abilities, and generally the experiencers that I work with have also had other types of paranormal experiences,
Hmm.
perhaps with discarnate spirits or ghosts, if you will, or
Right.
Mhm.
telekinesis or some other kind of thing. So these are
Right.
people who were born with a skill. And I just think, really, maybe it's a question, since many advanced races are telepathic, maybe it's just easier if they work with humans who can already sort of do it. It's kind of like,
Yeah.
if you think about
Yeah.
Jane Goodall, in Africa
Mhm.
doing her research, and she comes across a species of simian that has started to develop a more of a humanoid esophagus and can actually form words. Now, wouldn't you spend most of your effort working with those beings who were on the cusp of communication? then,
Right.
I think it might be something like that.
That's
Um,
very, yeah, that's profound.
Mm-hmm.
I would venture to say that's pretty accurate. At least that would be my assumption. It's a path of least resistance. They've already
mhm.
got,
Yeah.
they've already got a lot to do. So,
Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
and there are individuals that I work with who it's almost like they have double lives. In other words, I we have found, not just myself, but the few of us that work in this area, have found that around midlife, experiencers seem to have less physical experiences. I mean by that where they're, floated out of the roof or through the window, or,
Mm-hmm.
or just walked outside in the middle of a field somewhere. They seem to have less of those, and the experiences begin to be predominantly about astral projection. So this is
mm,
another thing that is very important in a form of communication and interaction with species who are just a little bit more further down the pike than we are. So,
right.
and I can absolutely see that. I mean, space travel, I think, even if there are, which I believe there are portals and corridors, even if there are those
Mm-hmm.
things, I think it's pretty rigorous. And there are, from what I have heard, there are whole species that are explorers that don't ever physically leave their planet. They project
Oh,
themselves in a kind of a holographic way that is so real that it is virtually the same as them being there. So um,
that's too fascinating.
that seems to be what's happening.
Mm,
So many of the people I work with after they get to midlife or a certain age, they have like a job. They collaborate with other, beings, and they are often much more brilliant when they're outside of their body, so to speak, when they're projecting their etheric body than they are, inside. So this idea of intelligence, we all have phenomenal intelligence once we get out of the meat suit, apparently. So
Right.
yeah, that's so awesome.
I'm hoping.
There's so much there that I want to unpack because it's just,
Okay.
I definitely have a lot of my personal beliefs and thoughts, and I know Nicole does too. But before we jump too far down that rabbit hole, you're an awfully fascinating person with such an amazing background. Can you kind of give our audience the 30,000 foot view of kind of what got you here? Because for our audience, they may not know, but there's a lot more to what you do, not just with UFOs and things like that. I know there's some musical stuff going on,
Hmm.
so or had in the past. So yeah, if you
Well,
could kind of let them know.
I'm from a show business family, if you will. I was raised in New York and Los Angeles, and my father was not only a very busy and well-known bass player. In fact, he's the bass player on the record "Stand by Me." Da da da
Mm-hmm.
da da.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my dad, Whitey Mitchell, and when I was still very young, he went on to become a producer and Emmy-winning writer for a whole lot of television shows that you probably remember from your childhood. All in the Family, Good
Oh
Times,
yeah.
The Jeffersons. He created
Oh,
Mork and
wow.
Mindy for Robin Williams. He has Emmys for Mary Tyler Moore. He wrote MASH, and I mean, on and
Oh,
on and on.
wow.
So I kind of grew up in that show business environment. We're all in the business in some respect. So
Sure.
I began, and I still am, an actor and a singer, and I still do acting work when anybody asks me, and I sing regularly. I'm mostly interested in jazz, and I work in some nice little clubs. So I do all that. I also had when my kids were growing up, I had a long career, and it was pretty long in public relations, specifically in the jazz area. So I worked for
Right.
all the major record labels, and I handled at one time all of Warner Brothers Jazz along with my colleagues. So I was getting so disgusted with that kind of work, the PR work. And we were on the dawn of an even more hideous time in the sense of mediocrity. So the
Yeah.
era of the Kim Kardashians and all this, that I just thought, oh
Uh,
my
Yeah.
God, I just don't even. I don't even want to be involved in any kind of PR anymore. And then I thought
Right.
also, it's so counterproductive because when you have a client, you blow up their ego for 3 months or however long the deal is, and then that's it. And the poor person, is generally just left in a depression because
Yeah.
Right.
so I couldn't handle it. So I guess I was having kind of a midlife crisis. Now luckily I did not buy a red sports car and get a mistress. My husband would have been shocked. But
Yeah.
what he did do, God bless him, is he said, I just think you need some ideas, some direction. I know there's something wonderful out there, besides acting and singing. I know it. And so he sent me to have a past life regression. And
Hmm.
this was a very reputable lady, not the one who I ultimately became my mentor, but very good. And what I took away from that experience was, of course, the profundity of a past life regression in itself, magnificent.
Mm-hmm.
But what I really took away is I knew that I could do that kind of work. I
Mhm.
just knew it. I knew it. And whether it was a past life thing, because, hypnosis is ancient in the extreme. I mean, it's
Oh yeah.
over,
Oh yeah, for
by
sure.
recorded history, it's over 10,000 years old. And if you
Hmm.
accept that there were other perhaps evolved cultures on the earth, I think it's even older than that. So,
Right.
whether I did
Yeah.
it before, I don't know, but I knew I could do it. And sure enough, as soon as I could, I got my basic certification, and then I went on to get a number of other certifications, including pediatric hypnosis. I work in that. I work in addiction and dependence.
Hmm.
I work in pain management. So I have some special things, in which
Sure.
I've sort of focused and taken additional training. So it's an ongoing
That's awesome.
process. Right now, I'm going back to university soon, so that before too long, I'll be able to also be certified as a psychotherapist, which will mean that I have a far more open field of treatments and modalities that I can use.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
fantastic.
Yeah, thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
You're
I know a
welcome.
little bit about your background, so I
Mm-hmm.
was like, our audience really needs to know that. And by the
Uh,
way, I know Toronto has a tremendous jazz scene. So, but yeah,
they do, but it's kind of a minority niche music. I think it
Yeah.
always will be.
yeah.
As Frank Zappa said, jazz isn't dead; it just smells funny.
Ah, the great late Frank
I
Zappa.
know. I just had to lay that upon you. I'm sorry,
That's
but
awesome.
yeah,
No,
it's
that's
all
good.
it's all. In fact, I am one of the artistic directors of the Niagara Jazz Festival, which is a beautiful festival every year. So
Well, that's
Oh,
there we
that's
awesome.
go.
cool.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
all right, let's get into
Yeah,
some
I'm
stuff
ready.
here. When it here's my biggest question to just, I guess, starting out of the gate. How does an experiencer, because I would assume that there's maybe some experiencers out there that don't know that they've had
Mm-hmm.
experiences.
Mm-hmm.
What what happens in that sense? I mean, obviously they're not going to seek you out because they don't necessarily know they've had one
Mm-hmm.
or it's regressed. What are there some telltale signs? Are there things that maybe that are kind of commonality, like you mentioned, between the
Oh yeah.
experiencers?
There are a lot of there can be a lot of telltale signs, but one thing I will say, um, I don't believe that memory blocks, whether they were put upon us or however it happened, I don't believe that they can last forever. In fact, they really can't last more than 20 years.
Hmm.
So, what I find
Mm.
happening is a lot of people come to me in midlife because they are beginning to have breakthrough
Hmm.
dreams. They're beginning to have recall of
Yeah.
specific incidents. So that's how people usually come to me. Now, also sometimes, and this is one of the very beautiful things about being on a program like yours, guys, is that people from far-flung areas may hear what I have to say, and it may resonate with them. And then I am always open to taking a phone call and consulting, and even regression can be done on Zoom. I do it all the time. So there,
Okay.
if someone wanted to pursue that route, but meanwhile, I like to be kind of a ground zero for this type of information. So when people do reach out to me, I always get back to them. It may take me a minute, but I always do. So some of the interesting things that happen to experiencers that are, I suppose you would call them commonalities. Generally speaking, they all have insomnia. They all can't sleep. Either they have a dreadful fear of sleeping because they fear that they might be taken, whether it's that or whether their sleep cycles have just been disrupted. But generally, there's extreme sleep dysfunction. Small marks on the body, particularly triangles or pyramid shapes, are very common. I don't know why that is, but I think they have ways of doing like little blood tests that don't involve going into a vein. I think it's kind of all about more sophisticated diagnostic stuff than we can even conceive of. But I don't think that they have to, if they're going to take a blood sample, they do it transdermally. So that may be what that is. Sometimes there can be palpable implants. Now, my feeling about implants is probably a little bit different than maybe some of your viewers or maybe even yourselves. The common thought, or the everyman thought about implants, is that they're tracking devices of some sort. Well, first of all, I will say that every brain, every humanoid, every living being actually has a unique brain signature. So and we even understand this and can read them and perceive them. So any sophisticated being is going to be able to find us wherever we are. It's like tuning into a radio signal. They don't need little gizmos to do that. But what I think the little gizmos do is, and this is what a number of my clients that I work with have been told, they are really kind of like step-up transformers. They are of different designs, but the purpose is usually to enhance psychic ability. They're like training wheels. I don't know if it's they're stimulating the pineal gland. I don't know if it's anything that you could see happening. I somehow doubt it, but that is what I have been told through my clients. The purpose of most of these implants is simply to stimulate and increase, psychic ability that's already there. So, so that is one way. Now, who knows what goes on in some of these military combined ET Gray programs? Who knows? They could be using implants to for anything. But luckily, yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that's such a fascinating point because
that's the first time I've heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, and also spill my drink here. It's just water, I promise. I guess I would see that would be really archaic. If you're, for lack of better words, a visitor or an alien or whatever, however you want to put it. If you have come to this planet, you've already shown your technology capabilities. You've already passed anything that we are able to do. So why then would you take? Well, yeah, that's true. You're right.
We do have like what is it called, the TR3W, the large triangle. That is a military transport to the lunar base and also to Mars base. Have you
Yeah.
seen some of the Mars photos? I digress, but some of the photos that have been taken with the current Mars apparatus. Yesterday I
Not
was watching
currently.
it, and there was a pyramidal structure. It wasn't huge,
Huh.
but it was obviously some.
Mm,
I mean, they showed about
Wow.
3 things that were like
wow.
clearly
Yeah.
not of a natural formation of anything that we know to be
Huh.
true. So, but
So I'll
anyway,
have to
those.
look
So
that up.
we have a lot of reverse engineered stuff. We have collaborations going with some of the Greys. Um, so there's. But you're right when you say that. You know, how do we how do we know even what's going on? How do we know that these
Right.
are? How do we know that these craft that we see aren't projected illusions? How do we know?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the fact is we don't, because there's so much different stuff going on. I
Yeah.
think that some of the stuff we see is made of light matter, and it might be closer to what we would think of as hologram like. I
Hmm.
think the crafts that are used are by certain species have been built to respond to thought. Some of the individuals that I've worked with have told me about being allowed to fly the craft for a short
Hmm.
time, and
Yep.
that there are places where you put your hands, and it is an interface of some sophisticated nature, but all you have to do is think about what you want the craft to do, and it will respond that way. So
That's
Yeah, we
awesome.
just that's amazing because we spoke with Preston Dennett, and he
One
had
of the
one
stories.
of the
Yeah.
stories that he had in his recent book. I mean, that's an exact
Mm-hmm.
mhm.
experience that somebody had where they were able to fly the craft.
Well, and
Oh,
I've
I've
also heard stories of people being able to like go outside and call them in
Right.
just
oh yeah.
telepathically.
Well, it is a
Mm-hmm.
telepathic situation. And
Hmm.
if an individual has no fear, nor and we shouldn't, if we are not fearful and we can project love and well-being, um, the beings can be attracted and come. I mean, Stephen Greer does it all the time. Dr. Stephen Greer has events
Mm-hmm.
where all kinds of beings show up, and it's all based on his technique, which actually starts with some Vedic chanting and some other stuff too. So
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
it's a little esoteric, but no, that's I don't think you have to do anything that fancy, frankly. I
Right.
think
Right.
it's just a question of sending a message with your mind out there that you are ready to accept, and they don't usually give you more than you can handle. I think that there is a great, by and large, there is a great sensitivity about what is right for us and what we can accept. There seems to be there seem to be a number of species that have almost a paternal or maternal or fraternal feeling about us, because we are genetically related to a lot of beings, especially those from the Lyran system. The Yael, the Anunnaki, the Lyrans
Mm-hmm.
themselves, the Pleiadians. We are, with some of these species, indistinguishable. So
Hmm.
Hmm.
we do have, however it occurred, we do have genetic relationships with a number of beings in our, quadrant of the galaxy, if you will. But
Wow.
I want to tell you something. I want to tell you something interesting that a client told me, and because I think it will spark some more interesting some questions. But I work with one gal. She's wonderful. She said she actually wrote a book about her experiences, and she was. I took her from a place of fear and just fear in huge fear of falling asleep, fear of this, fear of that. So she really she really took things in hand, and was able to, integrate her experiences. So she was a lifelong experiencer, and she told me that she had there was one of the beings that came to take her on rides in the craft or little adventures. She called Angie because she looked like an angel to her. So this Angie became, I guess, almost like a friend. I think she might have been assigned to my clients somehow. When you're working with children, I've heard of this before, where there was one particular being who was there to make you comfortable and see that you're okay and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, she was flying in a small, what I would like a shuttlecraft with Angie. And she said, can you show me your planet? I want to see where you live. And what Angie said is, she said, well, I can take you to the place where it is, but I'm afraid your eyes won't be able to perceive the matter because the matter is moving too quickly.
Interesting.
So here we are
The matter
talking.
is moving too quickly.
Yeah. So I think here we are talking about, I don't know if you would consider that an interdimensional idea, but certainly different levels of matter and beings occur, and we just do not have the physical. I think that's part of the reason why we don't see a lot of the crap that fly around, because we just can't perceive anything that fast. And that's the reality of it. And when you're talking about light matter and matter that's vibrating very quickly, you're really talking about perhaps, our idea of heaven or the afterlife, in which ETs show up all the time, by the way.
Yeah.
Wow, that's definitely, that's got me a little tongue-tied. So is it your belief then that, and we've spoken to a few other, we even actually spoke recently with someone who kind of talks about like antimatter and things like that for propulsion and things like that. I would imagine that the planet that this particular, that she went to, not able to see it, that makes perfect sense, because I think we can only see, especially like with different color waves and different
spectrums. We can't even see infrared light. Exactly. There's a lot we can't see. Yeah.
That's absolutely fascinating. It's just what always, I guess what always piques my interest is we always assume that we're going to jump in some aircraft or some spaceship
and just be able to go
be able to throw it straight there, as the crow flies, and like, well, here we are, and I don't know if
not
it works
like
that.
I think there is or was a lot of life in our solar system, and there was a catastrophe that ripped the atmosphere off of the moon and Mars at one point. But from what I have heard, from at least a couple of individuals who have been in the secret space program, I will call it, for lack of a better term, on the moon, there are some grays. There's a gray kind of outbase, but it's not that we're warring with them. We have treaties with them. We have treaties with hundreds of species, actually. So, but on Mars, there are beings that are reptilian. I'm not saying they were the original beings there, or that I think they cohabited with humanoids, but they are a pretty big presence. And some of them, most of them, are sticking to agreements, and they're cool. But there are some that are not. And so there are always skirmishes going on Mars to keep the reptilians at bay. But I was told by several of the people that I work with in the secret space program that we pretty much control who comes into our solar system. So I don't think that we need to be living with fear.
They're come annihilate us.
No,
like
that's
the movie show.
Yeah, no, we're doing too good a job of that ourselves, and that's a big that's a big concern, because if we start blowing shit up. If we start using nukes, we
Yeah.
are
Mm-hmm.
disrupting the fabric of space-time, and we didn't know. It's like the worst possible pollution that you can imagine. It would affect
For sure.
many species. So they're very, I know they have a hands-off policy, and we're supposed to do it ourselves, but you know that they have shut down nukes and silos. They've shut them down all over the place. They do it,
Hmm.
and they will continue to do it.
I'm actually okay with that.
Yeah,
I
I'm
mean,
totally okay with that.
Mhm.
as a
Yeah, me
previous
too.
military as
Yeah.
a previous military person, I'm okay with
Oh, yeah.
some of that being shut down. I'm
Mhm.
perfectly fine
Mhm.
with that because we're not very good at some of the stuff we're doing.
No, and you
No.
know, those silos are old, all throughout the
Yes, they
Midwest and
are.
across the dew line. And I read
Mhm.
some very disturbing data on the condition of the silos that are
Yes,
housing these nukes and have done
Mm-hmm.
it's
for,
scary.
40 years or more,
Yeah.
maybe, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think we could probably talk about that for the
Yeah,
for the
someone
next
needs to definitely keep us in check.
Yeah.
So kind of bringing it down a little bit too, and I'm ultra curious about when it comes to hypnotherapy.
Mhm.
When someone comes to you, and I would imagine whether they know their experience or not, or wherever they are at that particular point, obviously there could be some distress, like you've mentioned. A few of
Mhm.
them come to you, we get frightened and things like
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
But also, there's got to be some kind of amount of folks that come to you that are actually struggling with, some mental illnesses and
Oh
things like that.
yes. Oh yeah. And this is a very tough aspect, because
Sure.
certainly not everybody who reaches out to me is an experiencer.
Right.
And many a times, these individuals are really in need of some real serious mental health care. So,
Right.
what I do, and I should probably say in Canada, and it's probably true in parts of the US, but it's state by state, so I can't speak for it. But in Canada, as a hypnotherapist, even a master hypnotherapist, I cannot legally work with anyone who has been diagnosed with a mental illness. Now, by
Hmm.
mental illness, I don't consider anxiety, depression, phobia. I'm
Right.
talking about like borderline personality disorders,
Right.
schizophrenia, psychosis, sociopathy, this kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
so I have to be very careful to make sure that someone is mentally healthy before I work
Right.
with them. So I always have a kind of an in-depth, conference or chat, before I ever agree to see anyone. And usually by the time, I'm done with that, I have a pretty good idea of
Right.
what we're talking about. Now,
Hmm.
just because someone may have a mental health issue does not preclude the idea that they're also an experiencer.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
very important to remember. So the only thing I can do in my current circumstance is I have colleagues who are psychotherapists, psychologists, and psychiatrists, and I have several of them that are open to the idea of experiencers. So I will always refer one of these dear people on to a colleague, and if they're in such dire circumstances that they can't pay, that doesn't matter. I'll make sure that they get seen by somebody who is qualified to figure out what's going on.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I've always wondered that because, and you're right, they're not mutually exclusive. So you could still have an illness and still be an experiencer, but that'd
Oh
be
golly, yeah.
well. And I would imagine that, let's say you're an experiencer and you know it, that could also cause a lot of anxiety, depression, things of that nature.
Well,
So
yeah. I
yeah,
mean, they're all suffering with anxiety disorders. The people that come to me initially, they are all suffering
Mhm.
with anxiety disorders and fears and deep questions about their sanity. I mean, you got to realize that as a hypnotherapist, I'm like, the last chance Texaco of mental health. you know.
Right. Yeah.
And many times these perfectly sane people have been through, their medical doctor or psychiatrist or this or that, and have been told, well, I'm not sure why you're having these episodes, but there's nothing wrong with you mentally. So this is the
Mm.
kind of thing that experiencers will hear often. And then they're just
Okay.
left in an even more confused state. And then perhaps they have some breakthrough of memories. In fact, I have a policy, and I just got this from my friend Kathy Martin. Maybe you've had her on the show. She's wonderful. She's the niece of Betty Hill, of Barney and Betty Hill,
Oh,
and
okay.
she's
Yeah.
a author of many fine books, and she's just a
Mm.
lovely human being. So she's a practitioner or psychotherapist. She told me that she doesn't regress anyone or see anyone for this issue unless they have at least a partially recalled memory. So that's her litmus test. That's what she uses and it's a good guideline too.
It
It
is good.
really
Yeah.
Yeah.
is. If someone
Yeah.
comes in with, feelings and fears and, only, it's not that that's not significant or possible or relevant, but we have to have something to go after when we get into the regression. You know what I mean?
Right.
And
Yeah.
what we generally do is we take the individual to that place where there is the most consciously recalled memory first.
Yeah. I
To
mean,
be able to guide them. That makes
Mhm.
sense.
makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Wait, so that kind of makes me think about um your clients there, and you're going through this, and you're walking them through, arguably it could have been a traumatic, may not
Mhm.
necessarily, but it's going to
Mhm.
be, it's definitely life altering.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And you're working through these things. Once they have, once they're no longer under hypnosis, and we've already gotten to that point where they either now know they've had an experience, or
Mhm.
that they've known either way, but now they've got the knowledge. Do you find that even if it's somewhat frightening, or if it's somewhat difficult to deal with, that it's a little bit alleviating for them because they're able to
Oh, yeah.
deal with it? Right.
There's
That's
a
what I
lot
was
of
thinking.
relief. There's often a lot of relief. Big relief to know that they're not insane, that they're talking to someone
Mhm.
who does this and has heard it all before, right? And
Right.
Right.
so it can be extremely relieving. Now also, there's a lot of aftercare involved with also past life and interlife regression as well. A lot of aftercare. So I make sure when that person, leaves my office, that they're feeling good, that they're unafraid. I sometimes give them materials with which to write about, because very frequently people will get, once we start digging around in there, people will get even more details than they recounted to me. So I give them materials to do some inspired drawings, and I have to say it is usually a very life affirming, comforting type of thing. Plus, just going through the hypnosis practice, going through the experience of it is very pleasurable. Most people have never been that relaxed in their life. And that wonderful feeling lasts for quite some time after the session. So I am able, even if these people come to me like a ball of anxiety, I am usually able to unfurl them and get them feeling good and positive. And also sleep is a big thing. I usually give them a lot of sleep suggestions for, the things that they go through in their life, so they can start resuming getting sleep. And once they're not afraid, usually the sleep does come. But that, I just got to mention one thing. It's kind of funny. One of my clients who is a college professor. He was one of these people that I told you about, where he has kind of another life where he works on a big mothership in some aspect of training children or something. Anyway, so So he was just exhausted. He never got any sleep. It wasn't that he was afraid to sleep, it's that they had him working, all night and, like 7 nights a week, and he never got any sleep. So I said, well, why don't we do this? I bet that they don't really understand our need for sleep and the way our system works. And that's when we reboot our chemistry. They don't really get that. I said, so let's put you into trance, and I'm going to have you ask them to only involve you in work for them on the weekends.
Yeah, that makes
Nice.
sense.
And
Yeah.
it worked.
You're like HR.
It worked. They understood. They understood how we had, 7 cycles in the day and the 2 at the end. They got it. So he no longer had that issue of just being so drained and exhausted, like all the time. So
That's
the
awesome.
adventures still occur, but they just occur on the weekend.
That's just so funny. Yeah, you're right. She's like an
She's
HR
like
department.
the HR department.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
it's the HR department.
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
So we're now an experiencer. We know that, and we've gotten to this point. And there's a point I want to get to, because in speaking with Preston and a few other folks, when it comes to like familial lines, and when it comes to we've often heard, and I know a lot of people know this or may not know it, I don't know, but there seems to be a lot with family lines, and we've also heard RH factor also comes into play a little bit too. But can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I think you're right when you say that there are familial lines, and again, we're talking about probably psychic ability. It may be, or they may have such a unique ability to analyze, the genome, that they may actually know who they're directly related to. So it may be one of those two things. I'm not sure which one, but there are definitely familial connections. Sometimes they're easier to find in the female lines, and that's probably only because the women are more apt to talk about it. So so it's hard. It's a hard thing to measure as far as the male experience, but we certainly have plenty of evidence that that's what's occurring in the female lines. And even, speaking of Kathleen Marden, her, Betty Hill had other experiences before the one with Barney. And also, Kathleen Marden said that her mother had an experience, Betty's sister. So that indeed is familiar. I hear about that. I hear about that quite often, where I say, "Well, my mother or my sister," and very often, there are abductions, there are contact experiences where an entire family is taken, or all of the siblings, and some of the siblings continue to have experiences and some don't, probably because they don't have the genetic thing that is optimum. Now, O negative blood, it's very interesting that you should bring that up, because it is a very quirky kind of thing. It is the oldest blood type. They know when different blood types came into being, and O is the initial one, and probably O negative, because we have no rhesus factor. We have no coating on our red blood cells that is a thing you find in simians. Okay, so there is a school of thought that O negative blood was in fact and is in fact the blood type of the Anunnaki, who many people believe were directly involved with the upgrading of Neanderthals and Denisovans into what we now call the Homo sapiens sapien. So that is a thought. It's certainly true that O negative blood is rare. I have it myself. So does one of my children. And it is it's very common, it's quite common in Ireland, and also parts of Scotland. It's quite common amongst the oh gosh, what are these people? They're ancient. They live in the mountains between France. The Basque people. The Basque
Oh, yeah.
people have a huge high rate of O negative blood that is beyond anything that would be, considered normal in any kind of statistics. I believe that the Druze people also have now we're talking about some isolate cultures too, like the
Right.
Yeah.
Druze in the Middle East were pretty isolate. They only married within their own communities, as I think the Basque people have done. So it might be just a fact of these ancient civilizations have continued to hold on to their initial blood type. I'm not sure, but it's rare, and it's contained in certain areas. And I can tell you this, and I mean, people will probably start arguing with me online. I think that most of the experiences that I have worked with have O negative blood.
Mm-hmm.
That's
I
interesting.
do. I
because-
do.
Yeah.
I always ask them. Now, I'm not doing blood
Mhm.
typing in my office, but I
Right,
always ask
right.
them their blood type. I don't even say, "Do you have O negative blood?" I don't say it that way. What's your blood type? Do you know?
Right.
Right.
Just out of interest. So there's a disproportionate amount of people that come to me that have O negative blood. Yeah.
Well, we did an episode on the Hudson Valley, and
Oh.
everybody that they did a study of the abductions in that area, and they found of the people that they studied, what was it, like 90%
Yeah.
all had O negative blood.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's
Wasn't
it's
that
fascinating.
something? Wasn't that
Yes.
something in the Hudson Valley? My
Yeah.
Oh, the
goodness.
Hudson Valley, yeah.
And a lot of people are completely unaware of how much stuff is going on there even to this day, I think.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
absolutely. Yeah,
You know?
it's to us it's got to be one of those places, if there was such a thing as a hot spot.
Mm-hmm.
It is beyond. I don't even like saying it's a hot spot. It just seems to be almost like a world within a world. There's so much that happens there, and if the folks haven't heard our past episode, the Hudson Valley is very, very well known for not just UFOs, but also with all
Spooky
sorts
stuff.
of
Spooky
Yeah,
stuff.
cryptids.
yeah,
Ghosts and
But,
cryptids and oh
Mhm.
yeah, you name it.
wild. Yeah,
That's interesting.
it blows my
That's
mind,
so-
and we know people with type O negative blood.
Yes, we do. My
And-
grandmother.
Oh, well, there you go. So
Yep.
you're, if you don't have it yourself, you're a carrier then. So
Well, I've got O blood.
Yeah. Yeah, she's
O
got a-
positive.
Not negative. O
Yeah,
positive.
Yeah. That's like, well, we have my husband and I have two children. He is O positive, I'm O negative, and one of them is O negative, one of them is O positive. So it's
wild.
yeah, it just worked out that way.
It's so funny because that's why he was smiling at me while you were talking. My family bloodline: Irish, Scottish, English.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's
You're gonna
very
find
interesting.
it.
I'd never heard that before.
Yeah, you're going to find concentrations of the O negative blood in those areas.
That's
Yeah.
so fascinating.
Yeah.
Now, a topic that I've always found, I don't want to say the word fascinating. First of all, I say it way too much, but I always find not just interesting, but almost a little troubling at times too. And that refers to a little bit when it comes to like hybrids, kind of keeping with the same and family line. And I know there's quite a few different stories out there that different experiences have had, whether they know they've had a hybrid or whether they believe, that is one of those. Obviously, it typically only impacts one sex, right? Because I mean, likelihood it wouldn't be.
Well, there have been many male clients of mine who have been shown their children.
Really?
They've been taken on craft and shown their children, and it's not unusual for some of these men just to sob because it's so emotional for them. Now, sometimes I think the people that have been, I think the beings that have been most involved with this kind of genetic research are the the Greys from Zeta Reticulite, who now they are the Greys. They are the beings that were responsible for what we call the Truman Agreement, and later the Eisenhower Agreement. And this begins just around the nuclear age. The war is not quite over; it's about to be over. But the Roswell crash, it was not one craft. There were 3, I believe, and there were survivors. And those survivors who were from Zeta Reticula, which is a binary system. They had apparently lost the ability to reproduce. They couldn't reproduce, and so they went to our government, who was right there, and said, "Look, we will exchange some technology that you can handle, and in exchange, we just want to be able to take some DNA samples from some of your people." Right? Really playing down what was involved, and it was agreed. And so we got, among many other things, fiber optics, integrated circuits, Velcro.
Microwave.
Yeah, a lot of these things where we saw such an incredible leap in our tech. Now, the unfortunate part of this is that the abductions and the mining of ova and sperm, and the using women as breeding machine. I mean, it was outrageous and horrifying. But what I can say to that is that there was an agreement that had a time limit. And when it timed out, it timed out. And I believe that happened, in the 80s sometime, probably closer to the late 80s. But so if an experiencer comes to me and has had some of those brutal Zeta Reticulite things going on, they are usually, seniors at this point.
Right.
Which doesn't mean that sometimes they come, it's hugely traumatic. They never talk to anybody about it. And it wasn't like there was nothing joyful. It was frightening and painful and all the rest of it. So if any of your listeners are particularly fascinated by this early ufology, ground zero, if you will, there's a wonderful book called The Day After Roswell, and it was written by the late Colonel Philip Corso, who was there for the whole thing. And that'll really go into some great detail that I can't recall right now.
Right. Yeah, we spoke recently with Les Velez, and I think he even said that he had spoken with Corso. So yeah, it's interesting.
He's a sweetheart, isn't he? The nicest man.
Yeah, he's pretty.
He is. Guy. Yeah. Oh, such a lovely man. Yeah, he's just really wonderful, wonderful guy.
Yeah. By the way, we couldn't agree more. He was amazing to talk to. When it comes to the experiencers, knowing what you know, that there are many, many different species and different, it's like any other being or sentient person. There's going to be differences. Oh yeah. Do you notice that that regression typically happens to, like, can they spot the difference between the two, or are they visited by or taken by? I'm kind of trying to tread lightly on that because I don't want it to say that it's all evil or anything, but is it often by different species, or is it typically like one particular species will stay with the one particular?
It's more typically one type of species, but there are collaborative things going on, and there are certain species that have better skills at some things than other things. For instance, there's a group of beings. They might even fall into the reptilian category, but I'm not quite sure. But they have very rough skin, and it's kind of brown. And when I would regress people back to their earliest experiences as children, they would talk about the brown doctors. Now, they were always kind of careful not to be seen because they didn't want to upset anybody. And so they would take you from one place to another on each side, but not let themselves be seen. But I have heard later from other people who are involved in the various programs that the brown doctors are considered the top geneticists of, the galaxy. And they are always called in when they're doing some kind of research with, children or what have you. They're kind and gentle as well. They have the temperament of benevolent doctors, but they are always involved, it seems, in medical stuff, particularly if it is involving children. Now the grays, there are all kinds of grays. There are so many different kinds, and some of them are benign and wonderful, like like the being Bashar that Daryl Anka channels. And I think some grays are not even fully physical. I think that they have been engineered for space travel. Because when I ask my clients to communicate with the grays, who are often involved in taking people from point A to point B, when I ask him to communicate, he says the client will say, "Well, I can't really get more than this one thought." So there's a limited, there's limited brain power going on too.
Right.
So I think that some of these grays are in fact just, essentially cyborg-like creatures that assist primarily with transporting beings. Now I know the great Travis Walton, in his experience, which he now believes sees in a completely different light. I mean, now he sees it as he ran into a tractor beam without them being prepared, and he fell, and he probably died, and they cured him and resuscitated him. And that's how he sees it now. But when it was time to leave the ship, it was beings that looked just like us that walked him off the craft. Wow. Yeah. A man
he's
and a
definitely
woman.
someone I've been wanting to talk to for a long
Yeah,
time.
he's a wonderful guy. I've seen him in person a couple of times, and we had him. For some years we had a conference in Toronto called Alien Cosmic Expo, and there was a film about him, and he spoke, and there was a dinner, and it was really, really wonderful. So great guy.
Yeah.
That's interesting because Les was talking about that one person that, remember, he said something like it ripped the gray's arm off or something.
Yeah.
It's like it didn't even react.
Yeah, like it did nothing to it.
Yeah, he had the same.
That's right. I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is something that kind of thing I heard, where something you toss them across the room or something, there's no reaction.
Yeah.
So I think that's very true. How are we doing time wise, guys? I know it's we start a little bit late, but
I'm okay right now. How are you?
Well, it's going to be 9:00 soon, and I kind of have to call it quits about then. But
okay. Yeah, we'll start to.
We'll wrap it up here. But I do have one question.
Yes.
And maybe it's going to take a little bit longer. What do they want?
They want to help us.
Okay.
They want to help us survive this very dangerous time. They would like us to become aware and get to another level of awareness, and they would like for us to stop killing each other and blowing each other up and polluting the earth. All of these, I think they see themselves in us, and I think that we, as a species, as a world, we've had many resets. There, the Ice Age, the Younger Dryas, we've had many resets where we lost everything, every scrap of knowledge except that which was hidden is now being hopefully rediscovered. I think that they have much longer lives in general, and I think that they want to see us restored to the beings that we were intended to be. And beings of light and of goodness, and that's in all of us. But
Yeah.
there are other elements too that are, there are other elements on our planet that have a dark agenda. There's
Yeah. No.
there's a cabal of old despots who would like to see
Yes.
nothing better than to maintain their patriarchal control. But
Mm.
Right.
my personal feeling is until our civilization, our world has a equitable balance of power between men and women, that there will never be the kind of peace that we need.
That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's really no better way to end it than that.
Oh,
Leslie, how can our folks reach out to you? I'm sure they're going to want to. What's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
well, you can always reach me by email at Lesley, Lesley, at lightworkhypnosis.com. And that's all one word, lightworkhypnosis.com. And I'm on Facebook as Lesley Mitchell-Clarke, and also Contact TV. I've had for about 13 years, I've had a little chat thing, and we've had, of course, Les Velez and lots of great people on. So there,
Yeah.
you can look up Contact TV on Facebook, and you can also see some of our shows. And then I'm one of the directors of the Contact and Disclosure Symposium. We had the first one in April of this year, and so it was very successful, and we hope to do it again next year.
Awesome.
Great.
Well, once again, Leslie, thank you
Yeah,
so much
thank
for
you
spending
so
some time
much.
with us tonight.
Thank you,
And
guys. And
yeah,
I'm so
absolutely.
pleased to be able to share some time with you. And thank you for the good work that you do and getting the word out and making,
Thank you.
dispelling fear. And knowledge will dispel fear every time.
Exactly.
100%.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, and we're
You're
going to go
so
ahead and
welcome,
let you go,
guys.
and you have a good one.
Thank
All
you.
right. Take
Thank you.
care.
Bye-bye
Take
now.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Yeah, she's amazing, isn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah,
A
she's
lot more unpacked than I thought we would get.
yeah, and she's so knowledgeable.
Yes.
You know,
Well, I mean, we don't know how many people she's done this with. I mean, she's
Right.
taking notes on everybody's experiences. I mean,
yeah, that's
she's
true.
probably got a book full of.
No kidding. Guys, we've had a lot of different folks on that have been experiencers of this paranormal. I don't even like calling it paranormal. Just it's experiencers is just the best way of saying it. And it always seems to be that you learn something new every time you speak with one.
Yeah. But there's also similarities.
Oh yeah, no, for sure.
Like every
Yeah.
single one is like, they're here to help us. They're here to help us. They're here to help
Yeah.
us. Yet most people, what they know is from watching the movies. Like
Oh,
these
yeah.
evil aliens come to abduct us.
Holly weird.
Now, there's, some cases. The thing that bothers me is the whole hybrid thing.
Yeah,
That bothers me.
that's
And I think
unsettling.
about the women and, losing their baby. I mean, that bothers me.
Yeah.
But all the others seem like good experiences.
Yeah. I mean, it would be scary at first to rationalize that existence, because once you've crossed that bridge, there's no coming back. Whether or not you subconsciously know you've been visited or been an experiencer or not, your world is never quite the same afterwards.
Well, I find it interesting that after they've done the regression, now they're not as fearful, as much anxiety, but they're still having experiences,
Yeah.
is the way she kind of put it, like
Yeah.
they're lifelong experiencers. So that means after they know this is happening, they have to go back home and go to bed. And they know they're going to be taken again,
Yeah.
but they're not scared this time.
That's good. I mean, that's
Well, yeah.
better than living in fear, but you're still.
But you would think there'd be some people that'd be like even more terrified
Well,
now.
that's true. Yeah.
But I guess if you think it's just like a cool experience, maybe not.
Yeah. Well, what do you guys think? I mean, if you were an experiencer or are an experiencer, how does it impact your daily life? I mean, now that you know or think and you're welcome to come on too. We're happy to have you. Reach out to us at info@gxparanormal.com and tell us your story if you want.
Yeah.
Other than that, guys, thank you so much. Thank you for stopping by one more time. And we're so happy to have you, and we'll see you next week.
We'll see you next week.